The kitchen faucet dripped like a metronome counting down to my personal apocalypse. I lay under the sink, wrench in hand, staring at corroded pipes that had more integrity than my marriage. Water droplets hit my forehead with the persistence of Chinese torture, each one reminding me that even the plumbing in this house had commitment issues. Jake, we need to talk. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My wife Emma's voice carried that particular tone, the one she'd perfected during her recent promotion to senior marketing director. It was the same voice she used to fire underperforming employees, cold and clinical, with just enough fake warmth to make the blade slide in easier. I slid out from under the sink, wiping my hands on an old rag. Sarah stood in the doorway, wine glass in hand at 3 p.m, wearing that smug expression I'd grown to hate. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, despite supposedly working from home, and her makeup looked fresh enough for a photo shoot. "Let me guess," I said, tossing the wrench into my toolbox. "You've decided we need new kitchen cabinets? Or maybe you want to discuss how my blue-collar hands don't match your white-collar aspirations anymore." She took a long sip of her Chardonnay, savoring both the wine and the moment. "I want an open marriage." The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. I leaned against the counter, studying her face for any sign this was some twisted joke. But Sarah's green eyes held nothing but cold determination and barely concealed excitement. "An open marriage," I repeated slowly. "You mean the kind where you get to screw around while I pretend to be okay with it?" "It's not screwing around, Jake. It's about exploring our options, growing as individuals. We're both still young enough to—" "Cut the corporate bullshit, Sarah. You've already got someone picked out, don't you?" Her phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up with a text from Rick M., her boss, the guy who drove the silver Maserati and wore suits that cost more than I made in a month. Sarah's eyes flicked to the phone, and for just a second, her mask slipped. I saw hunger there, the kind of raw want she hadn't shown me in years. "This isn't about anyone specific," she lied smoothly. "It's about us having the freedom to—" "Right." I picked up her phone before she could grab it. The text read, "Can't wait for tonight, beautiful. Wear the red dress." Sarah lunged for the phone, but I held it out of reach. "Give me that." "The red dress," I mused. "The one you wore to your company Christmas party? The one you said was too expensive to wear anywhere else?" Her face flushed crimson, matching the dress in question. "Jake, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly. You want permission to do what you're already doing. How long, Sarah? How long have you been playing house with Rick while I fix the actual house?" Before she could answer, the front door opened. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, followed by a familiar voice calling out, "Sarah, I brought those files you wanted." Melissa walked into the kitchen, Sarah's best friend since college and the HR director at Sarah's company. She was wearing one of my old hoodies, the gray one with the faded logo from my construction company. Her dark hair was mussed, and she had that satisfied glow of someone who'd just rolled out of bed. The three of us stood frozen in a tableau of suburban dysfunction. Sarah's phone continued buzzing in my hand with increasingly desperate texts from Rick. Melissa's eyes darted between Sarah and me, clearly realizing she'd walked into a minefield. "Well," I said, setting Sarah's phone on the counter with deliberate care. "This is awkward." "Jake, I can explain," Melissa started. "No need." I grabbed my toolbox and headed for the door. "Sarah wants an open marriage. Looks like she's getting one. You can have Rick, honey. I'll take Melissa. Fair trade." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the kitchen faucet still dripping, keeping time like a countdown to detonation. Sarah's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the tile floor and staining the white grout red. "Dad, what's going on down there?" Our 17-year-old daughter Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, smartphone in hand as always. Her eyes took in the scene below, the broken glass, her mother's shocked face, Melissa wearing my clothes, and me standing in the doorway with murder in my eyes. "Your mother's exploring her options," I said loud enough for Emma to hear clearly. "And I'm exploring mine." Emma's fingers flew across her phone screen. Within seconds, she'd probably shared the drama with her 3,000 Instagram followers. The caption would be something like, "Family dinner just got interesting," with crying laughing emojis. I looked back at Sarah one last time. She stood among the broken glass and spilled wine, her perfect facade finally cracking. "You wanted a villain in your story, Sarah. Congratulations, you just created one." As I walked out, I could hear Melissa trying to explain, Sarah screaming, and Emma's phone pinging with responses from her online audience. The whole house was coming apart at the seams, just like the marriage I'd spent 15 years trying to hold together. I threw my toolbox in the back of my pickup truck and fired up the engine. In the rearview mirror, I could see Mrs. Patterson from next door standing on her porch, phone raised to capture the drama. By tomorrow, the whole neighborhood would know. By next week, it would be all over town. But I wasn't running away. I was just getting started. Duke's bar sat on the wrong side of town, like a middle finger raised at gentrification. The neon sign flickered between Do-E's and Duke's, depending on the weather and the bar's mood. Inside, the air hung thick with cigarette smoke, stale beer, and the dreams of men who'd given up pretending their lives had worked out according to plan. I found Duke behind the bar, polishing glasses with the methodical precision of an ex-cop who'd learned that repetitive tasks kept the demons quiet. His massive frame filled out a black t-shirt that read, "I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why you're wrong." Gray stubble covered his jaw, and his blue eyes held the kind of wisdom that came from 20 years of breaking up domestic disputes and scraping drunks off the pavement. "You look like shit," he said without looking up from the glass in his hands. "Feel worse." I slumped onto a bar stool and gestured for a beer. Sarah wants an open marriage. Duke's hands never paused in their work, but his eyes flicked up to meet mine. "And you told her to go to hell, right?" "I told her she could have her boss, and I'd take her best friend." Now Duke stopped polishing. He set the glass down and reached for a bottle of Jack Daniels instead of beer. "Start from the beginning." I told him everything. Sarah's announcement, Rick's text messages, Melissa wearing my clothes, Emma filming the whole disaster for social media. Duke listened without interrupting, occasionally refilling my glass when it got too low. "So, what's your play?" he asked when I finished. "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to just walk away, file for divorce, and let her have her little fantasy life. And the other part?" I stared into my whiskey, watching the amber liquid swirl like a tiny tornado. "The other part wants to burn it all down and dance in the ashes." Duke leaned forward, his voice dropping to the tone he'd used when interrogating suspects. "Jake, I've seen what happens when good men go bad. It never ends the way you think it will. Maybe I'm tired of being the good man. You sure about that? Because once you cross certain lines, you can't uncross them." Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Mom's crying. Melissa left. Rick came over. Thought you should know." I showed Duke the message. He read it and shook his head. "Bold of him to show up at your house." "Stupid of him." I stood up, throwing a 20 on the bar. "I need to go have a conversation with Rick." "Jake." Duke's voice stopped me at the door. "Whatever you're planning, think it through first. Sarah's not worth throwing your life away." "Who says I'm throwing my life away? Maybe I'm finally starting to live it." The drive to Sarah's office building took 20 minutes through downtown traffic. Rick's silver Maserati sat in the executive parking section like a monument to everything I'd never be able to provide. I parked my beat-up Ford pickup right next to it, the contrast between the vehicles telling the whole story of my marriage's demise. The Maserati's paint job was flawless, not a scratch or ding anywhere. The leather interior looked like it had never seen anything messier than a briefing folder. Rick probably had it detailed every week, maybe even twice a week. It was the kind of car that announced its owner's success to everyone within a 3-block radius. I walked around the vehicle slowly, taking in every detail. The vanity license plate read Rick MKTG, subtle as a brick through a window. The back seat was spacious enough for all kinds of activities, and I wondered if Sarah had already christened it. From my toolbox, I pulled out a small knife and considered my options. Slashing the tires would be satisfying, but temporary. Keying the paint would be more permanent, but also more obviously criminal. I needed something that would send a message without landing me in jail. Instead, I pulled out a notepad and wrote, "Open season on open marriages. Hope you're ready to play the game." "Jake?" I tucked the note under his windshield wiper and walked back to my truck. As I drove away, I could see Rick and Sarah through the office windows on the 3rd floor. They were standing close together, probably planning their next move in whatever twisted game they thought they were playing. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They assumed I'd roll over and take it like the good, reliable husband I'd always been. They thought they could rewrite the rules of our marriage without considering that I might have some rules of my own. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. "Jake, we need to talk." "I thought we already talked. You want an open marriage, you've got one. Congratulations." This isn't how it was supposed to go." "How was it supposed to go, Sarah? You announce you want to sleep with other people. I say, 'Gee, honey, what a great idea.' And then we all pretend this is normal?" "It is normal. Lots of couples don't ambush their spouses with ultimatums while their affair partners are texting them." Silence stretched between us like a chasm. In the background, I could hear office noise, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the ambient sound of Sarah's new world. "I never meant to hurt you," she said finally. "But you did it anyway. Jake, please, can we just—" I hung up and turned off the phone. Whatever Sarah wanted to say, I wasn't ready to hear it. Not yet. First, I had some research to do. The Riverside Country Club's annual charity gala was the kind of event where Sarah felt most at home. Overpriced wine, underdressed waiters, and enough fake smiles to power a small city. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks ago, back when we were still pretending to be a happy couple. Sarah had circled the date on our calendar in red ink, already planning her outfit and networking strategy. Now, standing in the club's marble foyer wearing my best suit, the one I'd bought for our wedding 15 years ago, I felt like a wolf in sheep's clothing. The other guests glided past in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, their conversations a blend of business deals and social gossip. "Jake, what are you doing here?" I turned to find Melissa approaching, looking stunning in a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, and her makeup was flawless. She looked nothing like the woman who'd been wearing my hoodie in my kitchen 3 days ago. "Same thing as everyone else," I said, adjusting my tie. "Supporting charity. Sarah doesn't know you're coming." Sarah doesn't know a lot of things, like the fact that her best friend has been sleeping with her husband behind her back. Melissa's face went pale beneath her foundation. "Jake, we need to talk." "Do we? Because I'm pretty sure we covered everything the other day. You want to play games, Melissa? Let's play." I took her arm and guided her toward the main ballroom, where the evening's festivities were already underway. A jazz quartet played softly in one corner, while guests mingled around cocktail tables draped in white linen. The air smelled of expensive perfume and even more expensive wine. Sarah stood near the silent auction display, radiant in a red dress that hugged every curve. Rick hovered beside her like a well-dressed parasite, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. They looked perfect together, the successful executive and her powerful boss, playing the part of the golden couple. "There they are," I murmured to Melissa. "The happy couple." "Jake, please don't make a scene." "Who says I'm making a scene? I'm just here to support my wife's career." We made our way through the crowd, stopping to chat with various acquaintances who seemed surprised to see us together. I played the part of the devoted husband escorting his wife's best friend, smiling and making small talk while keeping one eye on Sarah and Rick. "Jake!" Sarah's voice carried across the room when she finally spotted us. Her smile was bright enough to power the club's chandelier, but her eyes held a warning. "I didn't know you were coming." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, kissing her cheek like nothing had changed. "You look beautiful, honey. That dress is definitely worth wearing twice." Rick stepped forward, extending his hand with the confidence of a man who thought he'd already won. "Rick Morrison. I don't think we've been properly introduced." I took his hand and squeezed just hard enough to make him wince. "Jake Thompson, I've heard so much about you." "All good things, I hope." "Oh, absolutely. Sarah tells me you're very hands-on with your management style." Rick's smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "I believe in being directly involved with my team's success." "I bet you do. Sarah's success is very important to you, isn't it?" The tension at our little group was thick enough to cut with a knife. Melissa shifted nervously beside me, while Sarah's smile became increasingly strained. Other guests were starting to notice our conversation, drawn by the undercurrent of hostility that was becoming harder to hide. "Excuse me," Rick said, checking his Rolex. "I need to make a few calls." As he walked away, I called out loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Don't forget to text my wife when you're done." Rick stumbled slightly but kept walking. Several people turned to stare, their expressions ranging from confused to scandalized. Sarah grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my suit jacket. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she hissed. "Wrong with me? I'm not the one who announced I wanted an open marriage and then immediately started flaunting my affair partner at public events. Keep your voice down." "Why? Afraid people might find out the truth about your perfect life?" Melissa tried to intervene. "Maybe we should all go outside and—" "Actually," I said, turning to face the growing crowd of onlookers, "I think everyone should know what we're really celebrating tonight." Sarah's face went white. "Jake, don't." But I was already raising my voice, addressing the room like I was giving a toast. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to share some exciting news about my marriage." The jazz quartet stopped playing. Conversations died as every head in the room turned toward us. Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear into the marble floor. "My wife Sarah recently announced that she wants an open marriage. She's exploring her options with her boss Rick, and I'm exploring mine with her best friend Melissa. Isn't modern love wonderful? The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a champagne flute drop. Then the whispers started, a low murmur that spread through the room like wildfire. Sarah turned and fled toward the exit, her red dress a blur of motion. Melissa followed, leaving me standing alone in the center of the ballroom with 200 pairs of eyes staring at me. I straightened my tie and smiled at the crowd. Don't let us interrupt your evening. Please, continue supporting charity. As I walked toward the exit, I could hear the conversations exploding behind me. By tomorrow morning, the story would be all over town. Sarah's perfect reputation would be in tatters, and Rick would be the subject of every office gossip session for months. Outside in the parking lot, I found Rick standing beside his Maserati, talking frantically on his phone. When he saw me approaching, he ended the call and tried to look intimidating. That was completely inappropriate, he said. You know what's inappropriate. Sleeping with another man's wife and then showing up at public events like you're proud of it. Sarah and I have a connection you could never understand. A connection? Is that what you call it? I call it two selfish people who don't care who they hurt. Rick stepped closer, trying to use his height advantage to intimidate me. You need to accept that Sarah has moved on. She deserves better than a blue-collar nobody who can't provide for her. Maybe, but she's still my wife, and you're still the piece of garbage who's trying to steal her. I'm not stealing anything. She came to me. The words hit like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. You're right. She did choose you, but here's the thing about choices, Rick. They have consequences. I walked back to my truck, leaving Rick standing alone in the parking lot. As I drove away, I could see him in my rearview mirror, still staring after me with confusion and something that might have been fear. The night was far from over. The Iron House gym squatted on Industrial Boulevard like a monument to controlled violence. No fancy equipment, no juice bars, no yoga classes, just iron, sweat, and the kind of pain that built character. I'd been coming here since high school, back when I thought I might make something of myself in the ring instead of with a toolbox. Rick's silver Maserati looked as out of place in the parking lot as a diamond in a coal mine. Through the grimy windows, I could see him on the bench press, his form perfect and his muscles straining against a weight that was probably more for show than strength. He wore expensive workout gear that had never seen real work, the kind of clothes that said, I have a personal trainer, rather than, I know how to fight. I changed into my old gym clothes, faded shorts and a t-shirt with more holes than fabric. The regulars nodded as I walked past. These were my people. Construction workers, mechanics, retired cops who still needed somewhere to channel their aggression. They understood the difference between looking strong and being strong. Well. Look what the cat dragged in. Tommy Kowalski stood beside the heavy bag, wrapping his hands with practiced efficiency. We'd gone 10 rounds in the amateur circuit 20 years ago, and he'd beaten me on points in a fight that had left us both looking like we'd been hit by a truck. Now he worked security at the mall and trained kids who thought they were tougher than they were. Tommy? Still pretending you were a contender? Still pretending you weren't scared of my left hook? We grinned at each other with the easy camaraderie of men who'd tried to knock each other unconscious and remained friends afterward. Tommy's eyes flicked toward the bench press where Rick was finishing his set. That your wife's boyfriend? One of them. Tommy's expression darkened. Want me to have a talk with him? Thanks, but this one's mine. I made my way over to the bench press area, timing my approach for when Rick was between sets. He was checking his phone, probably texting Sarah or scrolling through social media to see if the charity gala incident had made it online yet. Mind if I work in? I asked. Rick looked up, startled. For a second, fear flashed across his face before he remembered where he was and tried to look confident. Jake, I didn't expect to see you here. I've been coming here for 20 years. You? A few months. My trainer recommended it for authentic atmosphere. Authentic atmosphere. I added another 45-pound plate to each side of the bar. That's one way to put it. Rick stared at the weight I'd loaded. That's a lot. Not really. You mind spotting me? Before he could refuse, I lay down on the bench and gripped the bar. 315 pounds, not my personal best, but enough to make a point. Rick positioned himself behind the bar, his hands hovering uncertainly over the weight. You know, I said, pressing the bar up slowly. Sarah and I used to come to the gym together when we were first married. Really? Rick's voice was tight with concentration and nervousness. Oh yeah, she loved watching me lift, said it made her feel safe, knowing her husband was strong enough to protect her. I lowered the bar to my chest and pressed it up again. Funny how things change. Jake, maybe we should... Should what? Talk about how you've been sleeping with my wife? About how you convinced her she deserved better than the man who's been taking care of her for 15 years? I pressed the weight up for a third rep, my muscles straining but holding steady. Rick's hands shook as he tried to stay ready to spot me. "It's not like that," he said. "No? Then what's it like, Rick? Explain it to me." I went for a fourth rep, deliberately slowing the weight as it came down. Rick's eyes widened as he realized I was struggling, the bar wavering slightly above my chest. "Help me out here, Rick. Don't let me get crushed." He grabbed the bar and helped me guide it back to the rack. I sat up, breathing heavily but not from exertion. Rick stepped back, sweat beading on his forehead despite not having lifted anything. "Your turn," I said, standing up from the bench. "I don't usually lift this much." "No problem." I started removing plates, taking off just enough weight to make it challenging but not impossible for someone of Rick's build. "How about 225? Rick looked like he wanted to refuse, but the gym's atmosphere of casual masculinity made backing down seem impossible. He lay down on the bench while I moved into spotting position behind him. "You know what I don't understand?" I said as Rick gripped the bar. "Why Sarah needed an open marriage when she was already cheating?" Rick pressed the bar up, his form wobbling slightly under the weight. It's not cheating if what? If you call it something else? If you get permission after the fact?" He lowered the bar for his second rep, and I could see his arms starting to shake. The weight was at the upper limit of what he could handle, maybe slightly beyond it. "She deserves to be happy," Rick grunted, pressing the weight up again. "And I don't? That's not what I meant." Rick went for a fourth rep, but his strength was failing. The bar came down to his chest and stayed there, his arms trembling with the effort of trying to press it back up. His face turned red, then purple. "Help," he whispered. I let him struggle for a few more seconds before grabbing the bar and helping him rack it. Rick sat up gasping, his expensive workout shirt soaked with sweat. "Funny thing about weight, Rick. It always comes down eventually. The only question is whether you're strong enough to control it." I walked away, leaving Rick sitting on the bench trying to catch his breath. At the heavy bag, Tommy was waiting with a knowing smile. "Feel better?" he asked. Getting there. I spent the next hour working out my frustrations on the heavy bag, each punch carrying 15 years of resentment and betrayal. By the time I finished, my knuckles were raw and my shirt was drenched in sweat, but my mind was clearer than it had been in days. Rick's Maserati was gone when I walked out to the parking lot. In its place was a small puddle of what looked like protein shake, chunky and foul-smelling. I smiled, remembering the laxatives I'd slipped into his post-workout drink while he was struggling with the bench press. Some lessons were better learned the hard way. The lake house had been in my family for 3 generations, a modest cabin on 50 acres of pine and birch that my grandfather had bought for almost nothing during the Depression. Sarah had always hated it. Too rustic, too isolated, too far from the kind of civilization that mattered to her. But it was mine, legally and emotionally, and it was the perfect place for what I had planned. I'd spent the morning setting up cameras in strategic locations around the main room, tiny devices that Tommy had acquired through his security connections. They were motion-activated and nearly invisible, tucked behind picture frames and inside decorative objects. The whole system fed to my laptop, giving me a complete view of the cabin's interior. The bait had been simple: a fake letter from a lawyer claiming that my great-uncle had died and left me a substantial inheritance, but only if I could prove my marriage was stable by having a family meeting at the lake house. Sarah's greed had overcome her suspicion, and she'd agreed to come. Rick would be there too, of course. Sarah couldn't go anywhere without her new shadow these days. Melissa had been easier to convince. I told her that Sarah was planning to expose our affair to Rick and that we needed to get our stories straight. The promise of drama and the chance to see Sarah's reaction had been irresistible to her. Emma had taken the most convincing, but the threat of losing her college fund if the inheritance fell through had finally motivated her to make the trip. She sat in the corner now, earbuds in, pretending to ignore the adults, while secretly recording everything for her social media empire. "This place is even worse than I remembered," Sarah said, wrinkling her nose at the cabin's rustic interior. She wore designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, completely inappropriate for the woods, but perfect for the image she wanted to project. Rick stood beside her like a bodyguard, his eyes constantly scanning the room as if he expected an ambush. He'd traded his usual suit for expensive casual wear that managed to look both outdoorsy and completely impractical. His Maserati was parked next to the cabin, already dusty from the dirt road. "It's got character," Melissa said, trying to play peacemaker. She'd dressed down for the occasion in jeans and a flannel shirt, but she still looked like she was playing dress-up rather than actually comfortable in the woods. "Character is what people say when they mean falling apart," Sarah replied. I emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of drinks. Beer for the men, wine for the women, soda for Emma. Welcome to the Thompson family retreat. I hope everyone's ready for some quality family time. Let's just get this over with, Sarah said, accepting her wine glass without meeting my eyes. Where's this lawyer you mentioned? He'll be here soon, but first, I thought we should clear the air about a few things. Rick stepped forward, his chest puffed out in a display of protective masculinity. Jake, if this is some kind of setup? Setup? Rick, I'm hurt. This is a family meeting. You're practically family now, aren't you? Sleeping with my wife, taking her to fancy restaurants, buying her expensive gifts with your executive salary. We're not hiding anything, Sarah said, lifting her chin defiantly. I told you I wanted an open marriage. Rick and I are together now. Deal with it. Oh, I'm dealing with it. The question is, are you? I walked over to my laptop and opened the video files I'd prepared. The first one showed Sarah and Rick in his office after hours, their business meeting turning into something much more personal. The second showed Rick's car parked outside our house on 3 different occasions when I was supposedly at work. Smile, everyone. You're on camera. Sarah's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. Rick's face went pale as he recognized the footage from his own office. Where did you get these? Sarah demanded. Does it matter? The point is, I've got them, along with about 50 more just like them. Melissa had gone very quiet, her eyes fixed on the laptop screen. Emma had pulled out her earbuds and was watching the drama unfold with the fascination of someone who'd grown up on reality TV. You've been spying on us, Rick said, trying to sound outraged instead of terrified. I've been documenting my wife's affair. There's a difference. I clicked to the next video, this one showing Rick and Melissa in his car outside a motel. Sarah's head snapped toward her best friend, her expression shifting from embarrassment to fury. What the hell is this? Melissa opened her mouth to explain, but I cut her off by playing the audio from another recording. Sarah talking to her sister on the phone, describing Melissa as desperate and pathetic, and laughing about how easy it was to manipulate her. You see, Sarah, while you were playing house with Rick, he was playing house with Melissa, and while Melissa was pretending to be your best friend, she was calling you a narcissistic witch behind your back. It's like a soap opera, except stupider. The room erupted into chaos. Sarah lunged at Melissa, screaming accusations and obscenities. Rick tried to play peacemaker while simultaneously denying everything. Emma started filming with her phone, narrating the drama like a sports commentator. And this is why I don't do family gatherings, she said into her camera. Mom's having a breakdown, Dad's gone full supervillain, and Aunt Melissa is crying in the corner. The lake house brings out the best in everyone. I let them scream at each other for a few minutes, enjoying the sight of their perfect facades crumbling. Then I whistled sharply, the sound cutting through the noise like a knife. Enough. We're not done yet. I pulled out a manila envelope and set it on the coffee table. DNA test results. Emma's paternity. The room went silent. Sarah's face turned white as paper. That's right, sweetheart. I've been wondering about Emma's real father for a while now. Funny thing about teenagers, they're always leaving hair in the shower, saliva on drinking glasses. Easy enough to get a sample. Emma stopped filming. For the first time in years, she looked scared instead of bored. Jake, you can't be serious, Sarah whispered. Open it and find out. Sarah's hand shook as she reached for the envelope. Before she could open it, Rick made a break for the door. He almost made it before Tommy stepped into the doorway, his massive frame blocking the exit. Going somewhere? Tommy asked mildly. This is kidnapping, Rick said, backing away from the door. No, this is a family meeting. You're free to leave any time. Of course, you'll have to explain to your wife why you're running away from a DNA test for a kid you supposedly never slept with the mother of. Rick looked around the room desperately, realizing he was trapped. Sarah still held the unopened envelope, her whole body trembling. Melissa had stopped crying and was watching the scene with horrified fascination. The thing is, I continued, I don't actually need to open that envelope. I already know what it says. The question is, do you want everyone else to know? Sarah's legs gave out, and she collapsed into a chair. The envelope fell to the floor, still sealed. How long? I asked quietly. How long have you been lying to me about Emma? Jake, please. How long, Sarah? Since the beginning, she whispered. Since before we were married. Emma's phone clattered to the floor. For the first time in her 17 years, she was speechless. Well, I said, looking around at the wreckage of my family, I think that covers everything. The courthouse plaza buzzed with the energy of the annual Founders' Day celebration, a quaint small-town tradition that brought together families, local politicians, and anyone else who wanted to pretend our community still had the wholesome values of a Norman Rockwell painting. Food trucks lined Main Street, a local band played covers of classic rock songs, and children ran around with balloons and cotton candy. I stood on the courthouse steps, looking out over the crowd of familiar faces. These were my neighbors, my customers, people I'd known for most of my adult life. They'd watched me build my business, buy my house, raise what I thought was my daughter. Now they were about to watch me burn it all down. Sarah stood near the gazebo with Rick, both of them trying to project an image of normalcy despite the events at the lake house 3 days ago. She wore a sundress and oversized sunglasses, playing the part of the successful executive enjoying a community event. Rick hovered beside her in khakis and a polo shirt, looking like a catalog model who'd wandered into real life. Emma sat on a bench nearby, her phone camera trained on her parents like a documentary filmmaker capturing the collapse of civilization. She'd been different since learning the truth about her parentage. Quieter, more thoughtful, less quick to judge. The revelation had shattered her worldview, but it had also given her a story that would generate social media content for months. Melissa was notably absent. After the confrontation at the lake house, she'd packed her bags and left town, claiming she needed to find herself, somewhere that didn't have quite so many people who knew her secrets. Her resignation letter from the HR department had been brief and professional, giving no hint of the drama that had precipitated her departure. The band finished their set, and Mayor Henderson took the microphone to introduce the day's speakers. Local business owners, community leaders, and anyone else with something to promote would have their chance to address the crowd. I'd signed up that morning, claiming I wanted to talk about the importance of supporting local contractors. "Ladies and gentlemen," the mayor announced, "our next speaker is Jake Thompson, owner of Thompson Home Repair and a longtime member of our community." I walked up to the gazebo, taking the microphone with steady hands. The crowd settled into polite attention, expecting the usual bland speech about community values and supporting local business. "Thank you, Mayor Henderson. I've lived in this town for 20 years, built my business here, raised my family here. You all know me as the guy who fixes your leaky pipes and replaces your broken windows. Today, I want to talk to you about something else that's been broken. My marriage." A murmur rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the kind of speech they'd expected at a family-friendly community event. 3 weeks ago, my wife announced she wanted an open marriage. She'd been having an affair with her boss and thought it would be easier to change the rules than to admit she was cheating. The murmur grew louder. I could see Sarah pushing through the crowd, trying to reach the gazebo, her face a mask of horror and rage. "Now, I know what you're thinking. This is between Jake and Sarah. Why are we hearing about it at Founders' Day?" Well, here's the thing. My wife and her boyfriend have been conducting their affair very publicly. Company parties, charity galas, romantic dinners at restaurants where everyone in town could see them. If they wanted privacy, they should have acted privately. Sarah reached the edge of the gazebo, Rick close behind her. "Jake, stop this right now." I looked down at her, still speaking into the microphone. Sarah wants me to stop talking. Interesting, considering she spent the last month telling everyone who'll listen that she deserves better than her blue-collar husband. The crowd was fully engaged now, their polite attention replaced by the kind of fascination people felt when witnessing a car crash. Phones appeared throughout the audience as people started recording. But here's the real twist in our little drama. Last week, I discovered that my 17-year-old daughter isn't actually my daughter. Sarah's been lying about that for 18 years, letting me pay for everything while knowing the whole time that Emma belongs to someone else. Emma stood up from her bench, her own phone forgotten. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't try to stop me. So when people ask me why I'm airing my dirty laundry in public, I tell them this. My wife made our marriage public when she started flaunting her affair. She made it community business when she decided our private problems were less important than her public image. Rick tried to climb onto the gazebo, but Tommy appeared from nowhere and blocked his path. The two men faced off while the crowd watched, the tension building like pressure in a boiler. "You want to know what an open marriage really means?" I continued. "It means your wife gets to sleep with whoever she wants while you pay the bills. It means pretending you're okay with being replaced while still being expected to provide financial and emotional support. It means being told you should be grateful for the scraps of attention you get from the woman who promised to love and honor you." Sarah was crying now, her carefully constructed image crumbling in front of the entire town. "Jake, please, you're destroying everything." "I'm not destroying anything, Sarah. I'm just refusing to pretend anymore." I pulled out the DNA test envelope, still sealed from the lake house confrontation. This contains the results of a paternity test for Emma. I've never opened it because I realized I don't need to. Emma has been my daughter for 17 years, regardless of biology, but Sarah's been lying to me about it since before we were married. The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. Even the children had stopped running around, sensing the gravity of the moment. The question isn't whether Emma is my biological daughter. The question is whether Sarah is the kind of person who would lie about something that important for 18 years. And I think we all know the answer to that. Rick made another attempt to reach the microphone, shoving past Tommy with desperate strength. This time he made it onto the gazebo, his face red with rage and embarrassment. "That's enough," he shouted, grabbing for the microphone. "You're making a fool of yourself." I held the microphone away from him, speaking directly to his face, but loud enough for the crowd to hear. The only fool here is the man who thought he could steal another man's wife without consequences. Rick swung at me, a clumsy haymaker that telegraphed itself from a mile away. I ducked under it easily and grabbed him in a headlock, using the leverage to control his movement without actually hurting him. "Careful, Rick," I whispered in his ear, my voice still carrying through the microphone. "There are children present." The crowd erupted in cheers and boos, the community event turning into something between a wrestling match and a political rally. Rick struggled in my grip, his expensive shirt tearing as he tried to break free. "Let me go." "In a minute. First, I want you to tell everyone about your wife. Does she know about Sarah? Does she know about Melissa? Or are you planning to ask her for an open marriage, too?" Rick's struggles became more frantic, but my grip was secure. 20 years of construction work had given me the kind of functional strength that couldn't be built in a gym. "You're crazy," he gasped. "Maybe, but I'm not a liar, and I'm not a cheater, and I'm not the kind of man who destroys families for fun." I released him suddenly, sending him stumbling backward off the gazebo. He landed hard on the grass, his perfect hair disheveled and his polo shirt torn. The crowd laughed and applauded as he scrambled to his feet and fled toward his car. Sarah stood alone now, abandoned by her lover and exposed in front of everyone she'd tried to impress. Her sundress was wrinkled, her makeup smeared, and her sunglasses had fallen off to reveal eyes red from crying. "Are you happy now?" she screamed at me. "You've ruined everything." I looked down at her from the gazebo, the microphone still in my hand, the entire town watching our final confrontation. "I didn't ruin anything, Sarah. I just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken." I set the microphone back on its stand and walked down from the gazebo. The crowd parted as I made my way toward my truck, some people patting my back, others avoiding eye contact. Behind me, I could hear Sarah sobbing and Mayor Henderson trying to restore order to the event. Emma caught up with me in the parking lot, her phone finally put away. "Dad?" I stopped walking and turned to face her. "Yeah? Are you really not my biological father?" I looked at this girl I'd raised, this young woman who had my stubborn streak and my sense of humor, even if she didn't have my genes. "Biology doesn't make a family, Emma. Love does, and I've loved you since the day you were born." She hugged me then, fierce and desperate, and I realized that despite everything I'd lost, I'd gained something too. The truth, and sometimes the truth was worth the price you paid for it. As we drove away from the courthouse, I could see Sarah in my rearview mirror, standing alone in the plaza while the community celebration continued around her. She'd wanted an open marriage, and now she had one, open to the judgment of everyone who knew her story. They'd called me the villain in this drama, the bitter husband who couldn't accept his wife's happiness. But villains, I'd learned, always had the best lines, and sometimes they even got to win.